The race to replace Frank Lautenberg in the United States Senate, it's on. There are Republicans and Democrats involved, and tonight we talk to several more candidates as the primary comes in a few days. By now you've heard a lot about it, the strangest election ever set in the state of New Jersey. The middle of August, a primary, and then a general on this election to fill Frank Lautenberg's Senate vacancy in the middle of October. And then there's another election for governor in November. So we're talking about a short amount of time for several candidates to make their mark, and we are privileged to have with us tonight a doctor from Somerset County, New Jersey, who has never sought elective office before, Alida Eck, and we really appreciate having you here today. She's one of two candidates in the Republican primary to win the party's nomination for United States Senate. And you know, you're a successful doctor, you have a good family, your husband's in practice with you, and Mr. Lonigan, of course, is going to be running against you. What would prompt you to enter a race in the middle of the summer to get elected to the Senate?
My husband and I started a non-government free clinic apart from our practice 10 miles away 10 years ago to take care of the poor, where we found that we weren't able to care for them through the Medicaid system. And I was seeing a patient that morning, on Monday morning. I'd seen one person who told me that she has a minimum wage job and was going from 37 hours a week. They were cutting her down to 29 and a half.
Right.
And I realized, my goodness, Obamacare is already hurting people. That afternoon, I got a call from a board member of the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, of which I was the president last year. And he said, you know, there's a seat opened up, run. We have such a crisis about to occur in this country, and you could make a real difference.
But the question I have for everybody, Republican or Democrat, who doesn't like Obamacare, as it's called the Affordable Care Act, what's to replace it? Let's say you got into the U.S. Senate, and the Senate and House were successful in repealing the law. He wouldn't sign it, but there'd be quite a battle about it. But what would you replace it with? Something has to be done about the high cost of health care, doesn't it?
That is a great question, and I have the answer. In fact, I think I'm the only one that has an answer that I think would work. That would be, there should be 3 levels of medical care and get rid of a lot of the administration and bureaucracy. The first is we ought to be paying just cash, credit card for the routine care instead of having other people tell us what to do and have the bureaucracy in between that is costly. Then we buy high deductible insurance. We used to call it hospitalization for the major medical events.
So in other words, that kind of insurance is you're really buying catastrophic insurance.
That's right, just like any other insurance.
Not for your medical care.
That's right, you don't
and that would appeal to generally younger people.
Absolutely, and then that would, just like you don't buy insurance in case you need to have an oil change. That's what we're having run through insurance, and that doesn't make any sense. But then the third component is the charity care, and that was what Obamacare was really supposed to be helping the people who didn't have insurance.
So what do you do about that?
Okay, we've got this non-government free clinic that we've run, and we have found that when you have everybody volunteering, you can do it at extremely low cost. No cost to the taxpayer. It costs $13 per patient visit. When the government does it in the federally qualified health center, it's $160 per patient visit. And if these people go to the emergency room, it's $1,000 that the taxpayers are paying. So the real answer is real charity. And all we have to do is protect the physicians that do that, so that we'll get every doctor willing to volunteer. We're suggesting 4 hours a week.
You protect that with insurance?
With medical malpractice protection from the state, just like they give to those doctors who work in the medical schools.
Okay, so let's say you get enough volunteers, okay, and your cost is $13 or whatever it's going to be, probably go up a little bit over the years, and they have to be referred to a specialist. What happens then?
The specialist is also going to be volunteering.
Yeah.
That is kind of the idea.
Are there enough volunteers out there, do you think?
When I speak to doctors about this, there's 90% say they would do it in a heartbeat. Because you notice people aren't dying on the streets. People are getting cared for. And the crisis is a little bit different than what people imagine.
Now, there's only 2 of you running, Lonigan and you.
That's right.
Have you talked? Do you talk to each other? Have you debated?
Not yet. Not yet. In fact, he isn't interested in debating so far. Maybe by the time people will be watching this, we will have had a debate.
Now, according to my figures here, unless I'm wrong, you're the only woman running this year? Or is
Sheila
there-
Oliver is running as a
You're
Democrat.
the only woman running as a Republican.
That's right.
And we're having Sheila Oliver on the air here to talk about her
That's right.
campaign. But for the Republican Party in New Jersey, which always has some challenges getting elected statewide, first time they'll have a woman on the ballot statewide for a major candidacy since Christy Whitman. I would think. Is that correct?
That's correct. If I would win, I would be the first woman senator from the state of New Jersey.
Have you had any major endorsements? That's hard, isn't it?
We've had former candidates, Murray Saber and Brett Schundler have endorsed me. There's medical groups across the country. I just heard that there's a lieutenant governor from Vermont just endorsed me. So I have endorsements.
Now, I'm not going to talk about the vagaries of campaign finance, but it is very difficult to raise money in politics. Are you either concerned or elated that this election is on August 13th? Some people like a light turnout. Some people are afraid of a light turnout.
The fact that it's not a long campaign is nice for me because I haven't done this campaigning before. And I think the light turnout could work in my favor.
Now, you've never run for elective office before. You're obviously an idealist. You're a Republican. How conservative are you on the so-called, and I say so-called because I'm not going to presume that you have feelings about them, litmus test issues for Republicans? Let's start with pro-life, pro-choice.
I'm pro-life.
Okay, you're pro-life. All the way?
Yeah, I believe that life is a life from the time of conception. And I believe also that the end of life is very important that we preserve it until natural death.
So in other words, nobody should be pushed in. What if somebody wants, in their last will and testament, asks for special situations where not to be taken care of?
I think
who makes that choice, the individual or the other?
The oath of Hippocrates would say that doctors really should not be involved in putting patients to death.
Okay, but what about the other way? Let's say somebody comes out and says, I don't want these extra measures.
Well, there's also consent, and so if people choose and their life is nearing an end and they choose not to have extraordinary measures, I would definitely honor that.
Okay, let's talk about guns. Guns are always an issue. They always become a bigger issue after a tragedy occurs.
Right.
Is it guns? Is it people? How far would you go? Would you advocate assault weapons? And I know they're illegal in some states, but would you advocate assault weapons for protection?
I think we have enough gun control laws on the books, and every time there's a tragedy, we don't need to add new ones. My ancestor was the wife of the governor at the time of the Revolution, and she...
Really?
Yeah, Mercy Otis Warren. She wrote a history of the Revolution, and when she saw the Constitution, she says there's not enough protections for the people. Wrote a letter to a friend, and it turns out that a lot of the suggestions that she had wound up being in the Bill of Rights. So I looked at her writings to find out where did that Second Amendment come from. And she said that the right to protect yourself comes from God, and no government can take that away.
Okay, so let's talk about Pat Toomey, a successful conservative U.S. Senator. If you won this election and won the general, you'd be serving with him in the United States Senate. He has recently proposed with this Democratic senator from West Virginia an expansion of background checks, which would just be a little more in-depth investigation. Do you support that or not?
I'm just of the opinion that there's enough gun control laws.
Yeah. So you're not in favor of any more gun control. Now, in terms of looking at the economy, this is such a touchy issue. Mitt Romney tried to examine the issues of the economy and explore the vacancies in it. The unemployment rate is still historically high. Stock market's doing okay. People are kind of confused. 6 in 10, according to a last CBS poll I saw, reported on a couple of weeks ago, still believe the economy is not doing well. What would you do to either stimulate or activate the economy? And when I say stimulate, I'm not necessarily talking about stimulus. What would you do?
I grew up in New Jersey all my life, and I know that we're not going to be handing a easier life to our children because of what's happened. I think government has just gotten too big and too intrusive and is taxing us way too much so that people can't keep as much of their hard-earned money. There are too many regulations, and I've seen this in the medical field, I see it in a lot of industry, that just regulations that don't really accomplish that much, but that make life harder and make it harder to have a business. The corporate taxes are high, the highest in the world, so we're sending jobs overseas instead of keeping them here.
Our corporate taxes are very high, there's no question about that, but our personal income taxes are among the lowest in the free world, which I know sounds crazy to everybody watching. What, are you kidding me? But they are among the lowest compared to France and Britain and other countries that have a democratic society. How can you justify number one, we want to keep the tax rates the same or lower, of course, we all want that. But how do you justify not increasing taxes at a certain point if that comes about?
I think that the government just spends too much.
Right.
And so there's a way to make a smarter government that is just less burdensome on the people. So definitely I wouldn't want to raise taxes, and I'd like to lower the spending of the government. And listen to this, if I get what I would like to have with this idea of doing charity care, that's real charity instead of the Medicaid system. Medicaid takes a third of the average state budget, a huge amount of money. Medicaid, that's the welfare for the poor that have no insurance. If we could lower that by a good amount, and say take $5 billion off the New Jersey, it's $13 billion we're spending on Medicaid, a program that doesn't even pay the doctors, so doctors don't want to take it. Yeah. That would lower the burden, and we could lower taxes, and the economy then would revive.
I like the idea of volunteerism. I just wonder how, I know you've done it very successfully with your husband and colleagues. I just wonder how difficult it would be to get people to do it.
Well, you must remember what it was like before 1965.
Of course.
Of course. So people, they weren't dying in the streets, and doctors did take care of the people who were disadvantaged and couldn't afford to pay. There was usually a couple rooms in the hospital where there was a clinic. That type of idea could revive, and we could get back to that. You just don't need all that layers of bureaucracy.
It's a new idea. I haven't heard it before.
It's a great idea.
For the modern era. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Alita Eck, a Republican candidate for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate, doctor from Somerset, New Jersey. Been nice meeting you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back with more on Voice of Reason right after this.